I recall one of my archaeology lecturers once pointing out that the invention of the lock is something quite significant. Now, if you were to, for instance, investigate an Iron Age farmstead, you wouldn't expect to find locks there. There might be latches and bolts and so forth to stop the goats getting to wherever you wouldn't want them to be. But the idea of keeping people out using locks might be quite alien to that sort of place. Not only would they not have all that much worth stealing, but even if you did steal it, people would recognise it. People would say, "Oh, isn't that Who's My Flips thingamabob? What are you doing with it?" Because almost everyone's possessions would be recognisable to almost everyone. The world was so small that you really couldn't get away with stealing somebody's item and then, actually enjoying it, actually using it. So there wouldn't be much point in stealing stuff. But if you went to a larger town, you might think that there are so many people around now that someone might steal the thing and I might never see them again. They may be a perfect stranger. There are so many people in this world I now live in, this town, this city, this larger society, that there are now strangers around almost all the time, and perhaps one of them might nick my stuff. And then he might get away with it. He might travel somewhere, or even in the town this big, I might not ever actually see him with the thing of mine that he's nicked. So I'm going to lock my thing, whatever it is, away. So if you discover a lock, you might say, "Oh dear, that's bad. Isn't it terrible that, after this period, people just didn't trust each other anymore, and that there was crime? Because why are there locks if there's no crime?" Well, that's one way of looking at it, and it's a perfectly reasonable and legitimate way of looking at it, yes. The invention of the lock shows that things have sort of gone wrong for mankind. But why not look at it the other way around and say, well, actually, perhaps the invention of the lock made large societies possible. You see, you couldn't have a very large town, a massive city with loads of strangers in it wandering around all the time, trusting each other to do trade. You couldn't have them go into a marketplace and exchange things. Perhaps money's not been invented yet, but there's some form of barter. Some things of value are being exchanged, and you couldn't have all that trust that's required for trade if you didn't have respect for property. And with a load of strangers around, how could you achieve that without some way of keeping property safe? So perhaps the lock could be seen as a freeing up invention. You could say, isn't it wonderful? People were liberated by the invention of the lock, because now that a society has locks, it can actually get big, because it's impossible to get trust in a world full of strangers. A lot of experiments have been done which suggest that you can only really keep up with about 150 people. There are 150 people, you know who they are, what they do, what stuff belongs to them, what they're up to these days. You could ask a favour of them and so forth. Once you get to towns of thousands and tens of thousands of people, then you can't trust everyone. You can't have a world which polices itself just through social norms. You've got to have things like laws and perhaps locks.
Lindybeige!